And yeah, we'll just make the session available later for anyone who wants to catch up. So we've got succession planning and the future of collections, and also advocating for our Botanic Gardens and what is their value, and some ex situ collections, conservation collection ideas. So yeah, I suppose we'll just kind of get straight into it. And we might just start off with maybe some of the BCALM committee members might jump in and help out with these ones, but maybe succession planning, and just some of the questions were related to how we see our collections in the future. Are they going to get bigger, smaller? How do we develop our collections as well? So in your gardens, is it predominantly just one sort of the curator, or is it a bit more of a collaboration amongst the gardens? So if anyone's got any any feedback, questions, ideas, raise your hand and have a chat. And I might see if one of the BCALM committee members might speak to these questions about their collections. We can. No one wants to have a chat?
Good morning.
Oh, someone came on. Peter?
Yes, good morning.
Morning, Peter. How are you?
Pretty good, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. A little bit patchy, but pretty good.
Yep.
Did you want to tell us about your collections up in Lismore?
We only grow plants that are from rainforest communities that occur within 200 kilometres of Lismore. Now, this was a decision made at the outset of the setting up of the gardens, because so many plants with rainforest origins can be extremely problemsome weeds in our local environment. So yeah, we have a collection of in excess of 8,000 rainforest plants from this area, and 57 of which are listed as either threatened, vulnerable, or endangered in New South Wales, and 19 of those are listed as Commonwealth species of Commonwealth import under the EPBC.
Yeah, and do you have a collection plan that you work on, or strategies that you work towards for your Botanic Gardens in managing living collections?
We're in a situation at the moment where we are really pushed for resources. It's very difficult to plan. Every advancement we make has to be funded through grants, whatever, because we only have a very modest budget, and we're entirely volunteer run. We do get some contribution from Lismore City Council, but yeah, we're basically looking for grants all the time in order to be able to progress with any programs. We're attempting to get a comprehensive irrigation system in place at the moment. We're also looking to change our database to either IRIS-BG or Hortus. This is a long process. It's going to take some time, full audit of the gardens. And yeah, we're basically dependent on whatever skills we can muster amongst the volunteers in order to be able to carry these things through.
And does anyone else in the audience today have experience with, I suppose there's probably a range of Botanic Gardens with us today who grow native and exotic species, but have sort of a similar garden to Peter, or grow natives? I'm not sure. I can't see all the people in our chat today, so I can't call on anyone. Oh, John's got a question. Yes, John?
Just get myself off mute and visionary so Peter can see me. Peter, mission seems a great one, and I think you're probably doing far above your weight. But is there any sort of process which you sort of prioritise what species are more important than others? And you talk about it's grant funded. When you get the grant, how long does the grant run for? You know, how many years can that grant sustain that particular project? I mean, is there? I suppose from my position, I'm not really quite sure from what you've said is how you can guarantee that if you say one species for 4 years, that there'll be funding for the next 4 years or whatever. Do you understand my question? Who manages that?
Yes.
How do you, as a collective? Sorry, you got the floor now, Peter.
Yes. I'm just thinking of things at the moment. Basically, we're completely dependent on volunteers. Grants can vary according to which program you apply under, but most of them have a definite finishing point. We're not looking for granting for any one particular species. We're looking to structure the gardens so that they provide the right climatic conditions to grow a range of plants. There is a huge loss of biodiversity from our area with the clearing of the big scrub, which was originally something like 75,000 hectares of subtropical rainforest. And we're doing whatever we can to preserve the biggest range of those. Definitely our priorities are for species that have been listed either as vulnerable, threatened, endangered, or critically endangered. And that's my priority at the moment, and trying to set up scientific links with other botanic gardens, etc., to ensure that we're part of programs that look at the genetics and beyond that, the general survival of these species in our collection. We don't really focus on any one species at any one time, but we're always looking to create these sort of links, to share seed, to share genetics, etc., so that we have a network that supports us in our applications for funding, etc. It's sort of a piecemeal approach in many ways, but there is a logic behind it. I'm not sure whether that answers your question or not.
No, but I think your mission is very honourable, and I think from what I hear, what you're achieving is fantastic. But if it's all on volunteer driven, on volunteers' time, you said the council had some input. Do they give you any base funding so that sort of if you can't get grants, that the collection that you compiled continues, or is it very much based on getting continual grants?
There is base funding, and the council supplies us with a gardener 3 days per week. We also have a number of philanthropists who make regular contributions, and we're looking to set up a trust which will ensure ongoing funding. It may not have the legal structure of a trust, but that's the term that I'm using at this time. We really, for any improvements, we're really very much dependent on grants. We have to apply for every improvement within the gardens to be as a grant. But in terms of the overall ongoing survival of the collection, it is secure. It's just a matter of highly dependent on volunteers and on donations.
How can BACARM through BGANZ help you, assist you? What you've obviously come on first and asking for advice. Is in what way could we assist?
The most important thing is to have a network that backs us in a range of areas, and that we're able to show that we go beyond our own small regional collection in terms of supporting scientific work in other areas, etc. Just being able to cite people from BGANZ and BICARM as allies does make quite a lot of difference to our chances of getting funding in the long term. We're always interested in providing seed, and we've been working with Mount Annan, particularly with the seed bank there. We're also part of the Mid-North Coast Seed Bank, etc. You know, any sort of extensions like this, where we're able to supply plants, cutting material, or seed, and receive others in exchange, is very much appreciated. And having this broader alliance definitely improves our financial viability.
I've said a lot. I've asked you a lot of questions. I don't know whether anybody else from BCARM would like to enter the discussion.
Yeah, I think we were talking, sort of chatting about this last Friday, weren't we, about that advocating for gardens and plant collections and their value within the Botanic Gardens. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the committee that wants to have a chat about this. I think we've got Peter.
Peter, with your
Amanda maybe
sorry,
might be
Shirley,
on as well.
You say you collect seeds and things like that, and you mentioned the Bicentennial Seed Bank at Mount Annan. Do you exchange seeds in that way?
It's only been a one-way flow so far. We've sent seeds down there of particularly recalcitrant species where they've been interested in their long-term preservation, exploring their viability, etc. And we haven't actually received anything back, but yeah, we're very, very proud to be part of that process, and it's an important part of our work. We've also supplied cutting material to the Australian National Botanic Garden in Canberra, and we're currently looking at working with Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens on their development of a dry rainforest community within the gardens there.
I think I don't want to sound patronising, but you seem to be batting well above your weight. I think you're doing a wonderful job.
Well, it's difficult to say whether we're above our weight or not, but yeah, we're involved with a number of fairly important things. There's always been an extremely capable group of people behind the gardens. We have something like a 22-year history now, and yeah, it's extremely well developed.
Is there anyone else online that would like to chat about their collections? Sort of similar to Peter, their sort of, I suppose, future challenges to collections and collection management. Yeah, we've got Joel with his hand up.
Yeah, hi everyone. Some of you may know me. I used to work for Botanic Gardens of Sydney and have recently moved to Doon Botanic Gardens up in Gladstone, Queensland. I guess we're in a fairly similar situation to Peter in some ways. We've got some conservation collections here which are really important and have received external funding. One of the keystone species that we look after here is Macadamia jansenii. And I think there's something like 60 individuals left in the wild that are known, and probably more out there that need to be discovered, but that's all just sort of hypothetical at this stage. I think for us, a lot of our sort of more conservation collections are based on thematics surrounding wild locality. And so one of the challenges for us is accessing material that's beyond our local region. In the past, we've had either relationships with other institutions or I think there has been in the early days of the garden some field work to quite distant sort of sites. But a lot of them are now national parks. They may have been state forests in the past, and the Nature Conservation Act makes it quite difficult to get permits to collect from national parks in Queensland. So in New South Wales, that wasn't really a barrier. You had to go through the licensing process, adhere to all the conditions and make sure you were in regular contact with national parks. But even for threatened species, so long as you went through the threatened species team and had all your permits in place, it was possible to do for conservation purposes. And then generally the seeds that you use for germination trials could be incorporated into the living collection as well. But that doesn't seem to be as easy to do up here. So I guess that's a bit of a threat for some of our collections, and particularly beds that are themed on wild source stuff that's now national parks.
And so, Joel, how could BCALM or I suppose and BGANS as a bigger group help as well? Is that sort of helping lobby with legislation, or looking at the legislation and seeing how we can overcome it? Or maybe there's somebody online that has dealt with sort of similar issues. Peter's got his hand up, so he might have something.
Yeah, hi Joel. Just curious, because when I was working up in Cooktown, the Queensland government, there was actually a threatened species network developed to look at conservation between Botanic Gardens. It started looking at the tropics, but then it looked at setting a subtropical group. I'm not in that space at the moment. I'm not sure what's happened to that, but there was a clear intention for Botanic Gardens to be very involved in conserving threatened species. So there was quite a strong direction from the government to actually engage with Botanic Gardens, and I'm out of that space at the moment. But Darren Crane at people like Brandon Espy, I don't think he's online, but Brandon Espy could let you know about that. Darren Crane at the Australian Tropical Herbarium, we were part of a group, and there was some serious consideration as to looking to quite threatened species and how Botanic Gardens might have a role in protecting those. So I don't know what's happened to that group, whether it still exists, but there was we had regular meetings, and there was a strong intention to develop programs around protecting threatened species. So I think it'd be worth having a discussion with Brandon or Darren Crane and seeing whether that program is still in play, because the intent was to create a subtropical group as well. So that would capture your area, I would think. But I don't know where that's at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. I think Rebecca might have some more to add to that, but yeah, I've been in touch with them both, and yeah, it seems like there is sort of a better need for coordination across Queensland, and just something to facilitate the sharing of data in terms of who's got what and who's focusing on what and things like that as well. But Rebecca, did you have something else to say?
I think you were present at the meeting, but that group is still ongoing. The guy who led it, John Hogden, he's now moved up to lead Capricornia land management, or I can't remember exactly. So he's left, but the group is ongoing, and they did form, I think it was called Threatened, anyway, it changed the name, but definitely it's ongoing. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that one of the things BGANS is hoping to do is to create a database of all threatened species in Australia and New Zealand. But we need to get funding to do that. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to do in the future. And obviously you'll all be involved.
Damien?
Thanks, Sheree. Just on that last one, Rebecca, have you been speaking to the Threatened Species Commissioner about that list?
No, Cass is the one who, the CEO is the one who's been talking about it, but I don't think it's got to that stage yet.
Yeah, great, because that's one of the ones that's in the action plan for the Commissioner, and coming up to end of financial year would be a good time to maybe get some money like Charbag did for the myrtle rust survey, because that was one of the ones they wanted, was to get all the threatened species. I mean, they're looking at EPBC, but you could at least do the whole lot at the same time.
Yeah, okay. I'll let her know. Thanks, Damien.
No worries.
Yeah, the other thing I wouldn't mind adding in here with threatened species conservation is I'm sure there's a few gardens who'd be interested in exchanging material or receiving material, at least looking at climate change shifts, and some of the work that I did up on the tropics looking at climate vulnerabilities, and a number of these species are already growing almost at the top of their, well, theoretically at the top of their temperature range. So it would make sense to do some careful assisted migration down to southerly gardens to at least have some material protected in cooler climates that are becoming warmer. And I'm sure there's a sea of botanic gardens that would welcome, material from the rainforests up north into their collection. So I think there would be an appetite to work, and maybe it's an exchange of expertise. Maybe it's not an exchange of plant material per se, but the gardens that are struggling can offer material. But maybe these more wealthy, higher capacity gardens down south could offer to provide support another way. So I think there's grounds for exchange, but maybe it doesn't look primarily as just plant material. It might be plant material one way and help another way. But I know, Peter, you mentioned Melbourne in dry rainforest. I know Melbourne would definitely be interested. I'm sure Adelaide's interested, and other less well-resourced gardens. So I think there's real opportunity to have some dialogue around exchange of material and exchange of expertise. So I think that's definitely there. It's just a matter of people reaching out and trying to make those connections.
John?
It's Tropical Mountain Plant Science Project, or known as TROMPS, that's come out of Cranbourne, but it isn't just run by Cranbourne. Went up and looked at some of those species. Peter, I'm not exactly sure, but I know Belland and Kerr or something was involved, and they even got sort of types of Vireo rhododendron and worked out that there was more than one species of Vireo rhododendron in Australia. And we've become part of that network, and people have sent us actually cuttings. And whilst I don't want to be negative, some of them have failed, some of them have taken. So we've actually got wild origin material from the mountains of Queensland growing in the Mount Lofty nursery.
I think we might have lost you, John. Back.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're cutting out a bit.
Am I still cutting out now?
No, that's better.
If I'm dropping out, I think I said enough, but I think that sort of supports what Peter said about bringing those species down from northern Queensland and sharing them between botanic gardens. If you want to contact Cranbourne, John Arnott, I don't think's on board, but contact John Arnott at Cranbourne, and certainly you could become part of TROMPS.
Thanks, John. Peter?
We could certainly use with help as an exchange of information from larger gardens, particularly horticultural information at the Lismore Botanic Gardens. I think that would be one of the major ways in which we could benefit from this exchange. We have a commitment to try and preserve rainforest flora from this particular area within our region. And we're not looking to actually bring in anything from other more northerly areas or whatever at this point in time. We haven't considered that as a possibility. We're staying focused on our original commitment to attempting to conserve and educate people about the flora of this particular region, rainforest flora. But we could certainly use a lot of support in terms of exchange of information about horticultural problems, etc. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's been sort of mentioned a few times in some of the forums about having somewhere where we can access information on people's knowledge and skills, or people we might be able to reach out to if we need to amongst the Botanic Gardens world. So I don't know exactly how that would look or where it would sit, but it would be a good resource to have, I think, for all gardens.
Yep.
I think, Cherie, just quickly, as I said, try and get beyond the thinking that the exchange has to be the same thing. I think for Peter, and I'm not saying that they're no good at propagating, but maybe they want some exposure to advanced propagation skills. Another garden could offer that as an online seminar or forum, or send someone up in exchange for the plant material or something else. So it's not that Lismore rainforest has to grow other plants, but what they can offer another garden might be attractive. So there is actually, in a sense, your building capacity of both sites. One site's getting potentially more resilient, diverse plant material, the other site's getting greater capacity to look after the plants in-house. So I think BCALM is the perfect forum for helping with this exchange. So I'm sure there's gardens who'd be willing to do that if they were asked and said, look, one of the areas we'd like to know more about or have some help with is this. It doesn't have to be money, it can just be time, it could be an hour session, and all of a sudden people have got a new way of doing something they hadn't thought of before. So I think there's a huge potential to do this sort of exchange. We just got to think more broadly and not just think about plants, but think what other things could actually be helpful.
A list of people who are prepared to offer those skills would be very helpful. A listing of people who are prepared to exchange plant material for information, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we can chat about with BCALM, and any time really. If anyone has questions or wants to get in contact with someone, I'm more than happy to send me an email, and I can try and find out a contact for you. Even just coming onto these network meetings and the other network meetings a great way to meet other people and chat as well. So I think someone might still have their sound on, microphone on. Rebecca?
Yeah, I just wanted to say your last comment, Peter, about getting a list of people. We're shortly, BGAN's head office is going to be sending out a short survey to all members, asking them what sort of things they would like. And that's one of the things I think we're interested in creating, is like databases of who's willing to exchange material, who's willing to have people come into their garden and get some training, and that sort of stuff. So please, when you see this survey come into your inbox, please do it, because it'll be on a priority basis, so that the most votes for each thing will win. But I think something like that, I'm sure, will be at the top of the list.
Thanks, Rebecca. Can't quite see everyone. There is a hand up, but I'm Amanda.
It's me, Cherie.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to talk about pretty much what Rebecca said. There has been talk at BGAN's committee level about setting something up similar to the Directory of Expertise that BGCI has. And I know you and I and other BCALM members have talked about setting up, and that this is something we were going to perhaps discuss at a forum later in the year about that exchange program, in terms of setting up a database of what gardens are available, or perhaps would like to provide exchange programs between their staff. But I just wanted to perhaps maybe setting this conversation in a slightly different way, or a different route. You mentioned before the word advocacy, And I guess I'm just really keen to hear people's thoughts on how they either are doing this or ideas that they have on advocating for their collections. And I say their collections rather than the Botanic Gardens, because we all know that the roles of Botanic Gardens are really changing a lot lately. It used to be all about the plants and just about the plants. And I think nationwide we are all seeing a lot more pressures from things like events and a whole range of other things that are really, horticultural staff really find challenging in terms of where the priorities now, how hort staff are not hort staff anymore necessarily. They're asked to do so many other things and direct their focus. It's like lots of balls in the air, lots and lots of juggling, and the time to be able to focus on developing collections and maintaining collections, I think, is really being impacted. Certainly that's our experience in Perth. I imagine it's that we're not alone there. I'm just really keen to see how other hort staff in other botanic gardens across Australia and New Zealand are dealing with that, really, and how do we be a strong voice for our plants and for our collections, and how do we do that collectively? If anyone's got any ideas on that, I'm really, really keen to hear.
Silence.
Oh, I know it's a hard question, isn't it? Damien's got his hand up.
Thanks, Sheree. I know with us at Botanic Gardens of Sydney, having the living collection strategy has been a big help in getting that focus on living collections and helping others across the organisation understand the purpose of them and the importance of them. But one of the things that we're doing at the moment is developing an action plan that will help us focus some of our efforts over the next sort of 1 to 20 years. And part of that is looking at the uplift in staff to build capacity and understand what their roles are. So going through and doing a bit of a gap analysis of the skills we've got, the skills we don't have, but also just looking at what it is they're being asked to do on a daily basis, because I think there's a lot of scope creep when it comes to people's positions. So that's a piece of work that we're looking to do over the next year and try and understand how we can better support our horts to focus on what they're actually hired for, which is the horticulture skills primarily. So happy to share where that gets to once we've maybe figured out some of it.
Thanks, Damien. Peter? Oh my God, sorry, two Peters. Peter Symes. Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
Thank you. I'm very bad at doing that. I think, in response to profiling questions, I agree with what Damien is saying in terms of having a strategy. It does bring, or some sort of high-level policy document, it does bring a gravitas to your collections, as in the organisation sees them as important. But I think the other way is about communicating the importance of diversity in plants to our public audiences, and people are still, unfortunately, a bit plant blind. I mean, if I roll up the gardens of a monkey, I'll have people all around me. If I roll up a pot plant, I might get some people coming over. But there's two areas, I think, in Botanic Gardens that we could explore to improve profile. One is that when we're looking at people's psychological health, it's well found now that higher plant diversity amplifies our capacity to have better mental health and deal with things like depression. So there's a thing that's good for human beings, which we always respond to. And if we have living collections and diversity, we offer a much richer experience for our visitors. The other thing that's come out relatively recently is that Botanic Gardens as a space and as a diverse space offer much more cooling benefit than any other landscape, even including some forests. So I think it's looking at your collections and looking what we always want to focus on the primary mission of plant conservation, but it's looking at being clever with some of our messaging. And I think saying that the collections are important, not just because we want to protect plant species that may become extinct, but what are the other stories that you can link to those, and human well-being and both for cooling and psychological benefit, is something that Botanic Gardens can latch onto. So I think, and there's probably other messages, other connections to conservation that we can use. But there again, try and think more creatively about how you message that. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw in, and there'll be other ideas, I'm sure.
John?
Yeah, I'm just going back to Amanda, what she raised, and I think what she raised was very pertinent, and I think Damien hit some of the nails into addressing that. But I think what we've got to realise as Botanic Gardens and part of Living Collections is that the essence of the garden that we are in now, and that Peter's so eloquently said, gives us that wonderful atmosphere and a place to go and relax, is if people in the past hadn't planted up our Botanic Gardens with the plants they have and done it with a collection development strategy, we wouldn't have what we have today. So what we really do need to concentrate on is getting that strategy together so that the future generations can still have that same quality of diversity of nature as Peter, and that tranquil environment in which to go. It's and some of the boulevards, some of the major trees, were just knee high to the gardener or horticulturalist that planted them. But without them doing that 100 or 150 years ago, we wouldn't have the Botanic Gardens we have today.
Thanks, John.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Even, I suppose, succession planning and anyone doing anything in that space, leading on from that. What are we leaving for the next 100 years, I suppose, in our collections? It's and I know too, I think we're speaking to Donna as well about in Ballarat. I don't know if she's on with their Begonia Festival and having some impacts on their living collections as well. So.
Hi, everyone. Yes, certainly we have our Begonia Festival, which is the long weekend in March. For us, that's over 3 days, and anywhere between 45 and 65,000 people each year descend on our gardens. Obviously, it's primarily around begonias, which are inside a conservatory, but it's also about the impact on the entire gardens and how we manage that going forward. There's also a lot of conversation on how do we as a hort team express those challenges to people who don't get plants, who are in other departments, whether it be events or whether it be people looking at economic impact of the festival, which is huge to the city. That's a challenge for us going forward. We're seeing compaction for our trees, but it is trying to we've had some leverage off our conservation collections, so we've been able to sort of work a little bit in that space and saying, well, these plants in these spaces are really rare or endangered. So it is a constant thing that we're working towards. We've still got some work to do, and certainly open to hear anyone else's suggestions on how they've been able to reach people who perhaps aren't hort staff and explain the values of our sites and how important our botanic gardens are beyond an event space.
Thanks, Donna. Is anybody else got any sort of comments around that? Oh, Andrea, do you want to jump in? Oh, you're on mute.
Hi, this is probably more relevant to Victoria, but the recent changes in heritage legislation has definitely pushed the balance back towards the collections management in terms of events. There's much more legal protection for trees and the landscape and requirements that events don't have an undue impact on it. So I'm not sure if all gardens have caught up with that, but it does definitely help. And I guess sort of with some of the events too, sometimes it's about trying to channel some of that money that comes from the events into the sort of infrastructure that can and planning that can mean that the event locations are set, the infrastructure is provided, there's less bump in, there's less bump out. And I don't think we're ever going to be getting rid of the events, but if we can make the right staging of the events easier, it actually means there's less time and impact on the Hort staff each time. I know irrigation can be a big issue there as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrea. Donna, you?
Yeah, absolutely on point, Andrea, and certainly we've seen that the exactly those new guidelines on Heritage Victoria that on our heritage listed gardens have been a real positive to how events are planned in our space. We do have protection zones around a lot of our trees. We do have limited spaces. We encourage people into our gardens. It's not negative. If we didn't share our gardens, what's the point? So it's a really valuable part of what we do. But just wanting to, yeah, from a Hort perspective, absolutely, Andrea, that's been a real benefit to us. It's spread the event out over much more of the gardens, which has actually had less impact in certain areas. So it's been a real positive. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. That's great. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'm just wondering if anyone else would like to pop on and have a chat about their gardens or their living collections in their garden that we might not have heard from. Is there anyone? It can just be a small, doesn't have to be, yeah, a big chat. Just let us know where you're from, even what garden you're from. I know it's a bit, sometimes hard in these environments to sort of capture everyone. But we can move on to another question if you like, if it sort of change the direction again. So has anyone got any sort of ideas on, I suppose in the future, I suppose we have been talking about the future and succession planning and then the difficulties, I suppose, in bringing these living collections into the future. And how do people manage change their collections, deaccessioning or bringing in new collections, letting go of old collections? Has anyone got any sort of ideas or projects they've been working on they could talk to? Maybe not. I think I've got Donna. I've still got your hand up. Are you? Not sure if you still got your hand up, or Amanda.
Yeah, look, if there's no one else willing to have a chat, I'll throw my 2 cents worth in. So look, we are currently reviewing our living collection or updating, I suppose, our living collections policy here at Kings Park in Perth. And it's been a really interesting process. We're sort of at the start of it, but in the past, I guess our mode of operation was pretty much one curator or maybe a very small group of people really made the decisions based on the existing living collections plan about what was put in the garden, so that it wasn't necessarily their opinions or, you know, their favourite plants or anything like that. It was based on documentation and guiding documentation, but you know, that document really is long overdue for a bit of a refresh. And you know, all of the things that have been happening seems really quickly, but probably hasn't been. But you know, the climate change aspect, biosecurity is a big one that is going to have an impact. Really going to have major impacts on how we develop our collections, but also how we maintain them moving into the future. We've just had one of the most brutal summers here in Perth that you could imagine, and the effect that it has had on our existing collections has been quite heartbreaking. And we really have to start considering some of those things when we're developing documentation to guide us into the future. The other thing I guess I wanted to add is that I mentioned that we're sort of shifting away from the responsibility being on one person or a small group of people, and we're really trying to transfer ownership to a much broader group in terms of making decisions about what we are doing to our collections, how we're managing them moving forward, ideas as well. We're really welcoming of ideas and just thoughts on how we can all get the best out of the space that we've got. You know, we've got lots of site challenges as well. Our soil is not great in parts. And, you know, we are a state botanic garden based in the southwest that is attempting to grow flora from the entire state of Western Australia. That's a big challenge. You know, we don't have the environmental conditions to cope with everything. Not everything grows happily there. I guess we also have to make peace with that within ourselves, that we can't grow tropical flora well. We just don't have the climate or the site conditions for it. So I guess it's it's daunting, but it's also really exciting in that we've got a really big group now that are really interested in helping us develop this new living collections plan. And, you know, we are faced with some climate and biosecurity challenges. I think everybody probably is. It's certainly not new, but being able to equate that with what we decide to do with our collections, I think is a really daunting but exciting process, I think. And I've seen there's a few Kings Park staff here on today who are involved in that process. So I don't know if any of them want to jump on and say anything. Probably not, but you've got to put it out there.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm just seeing if there's any more hands up. Yeah, we're sort of in a similar boat, I suppose, at Geelong here. We're sort of going through trying to plan and look at managing our living collections, especially and sort of what risks we're going to be facing in the future, and then yeah, hopefully come up with some strategies and plans to guide us in the future to make those better decisions. So is there anyone else wanting to have a chat about the future of their collections, or just about the way they go about managing their collections now? I think it's very, oh yeah, Joel.
Yeah, hi. When I think about, I guess, what botanic gardens all over Australia could do in terms of optimization, I really think about recalcitrant species where seed can't be stored, and I guess a list of threatened species with recalcitrant seed, or species that we know are susceptible to certain biosecurity threats that may not be there yet. And just prioritization of appropriate gardens within appropriate sites distributed across Australia for those species in a coordinated effort would sort of be my personal sort of ideal for conservation purposes. You know, it's nothing to store huge amounts of seeds in vaults for a lot of species, but for the species which that's not a viable method of conservation, there really isn't that much space to conserve a lot of these species. And so if you think about the specific requirements for those species and which sites might be ideal, and for slow growing and long lived species that might not be reproductive for quite some time, you know, really optimizing which of those should be in which locations, given you know, the limited ability of all of us to care for however many species there are that are under active threat or anticipated to be under threat due to climate change and biosecurity risks.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I think there's a need, I suppose, for that collaboration amongst all of us, and maybe that's one thing the gardens can look at, is having a look at climate matching to other areas around Australia and seeing where we might be able to fit better, or fit some of those collections that might be at risk in different states into our gardens if we have the room and resources, and reaching out to those people. So I saw Damien, you had your hand up.
Yeah, look, I agree with what Joel said. I think it's a challenge, and I agree with what Amanda said as well. For us in Sydney, having the 3 gardens, you know, with a diversity of species from Australia and around the world, we have that same sort of challenge of trying to see how we can actually grow some of these things in places they're not normally meant to be. So we've got a lot of work to do as we roll out our strategy and the forthcoming policy to figure out the best way of doing that, and which ones we actually make a decision aren't suited to our gardens. I think also when it comes to that threatened species side of things and the meta collections, you know, our experience of doing the Wallamais has been to look at what gardens in Australia actually have most likely suitable habitats now and into the future for Wallamais to be growing, and same with the gardens overseas that we've sent them to. So we'll be monitoring those and collecting data over time to see how that's worked. And then I think also, you know, one of the challenges that I'm sort of seeing that we are all going to be facing and probably need to start thinking about is we've done a great job with the myrtle rust meta collection. So the species that have been, you know, shared across different gardens in Australia, and, you know, there's obviously been a heavy load on those on the East Coast for obvious reasons. But we're not going to be able to keep doing this because there's only limited space and limited resources. So I think we need to really figure out a good way of doing this longer term and how we prioritise those species. So I think maybe in answer to your question back in the chat, I think that's going to be one of the really important areas that getting a list of species in gardens is going to be helpful with, just understanding what we already hold, who holds what, where, and how we can better prioritise what gets sent around and shared.
Thanks, Damien. I think Joe had their hand up. Sorry, I can't see everyone.
Yep, that's me. Thank you. Just one thing that I'm wondering whether PCARM could be of an assistance is we have seed that we would like to send overseas. We've had a request for Sephora Toromiro seed, the extinct plant from Easter Island, and we would like to send just a little bag over to Switzerland. But for us to get a phytosanitary certificate, we have to go through a freight forwarder or someone who's going to charge us sort of somewhere between $800 and $1,200 to do so. Apparently, the Department of Agriculture requires that we have software to load the phytosanitary certificate onto their system before we can actually use it. So they can have guys come out and inspect the seed, and that's all fine, but without the software to upload it to the system, we are sort of hamstrung. And I'm wondering, we've written to the Department of Agriculture, and this has been an issue apparently raised by the CSIRO and other institutions, but I'm wondering if there's any way that we could get support to kind of lobby for, small organisations like ours, non-commercial organisations, to have access to that software.
Yeah, I'm
Does
sure
that
it's
make sense?
something. Yes, it does. Yeah, no, it does. I'm sure. I'm not sure if there's anyone on who has had any, has dealt with this sort of situation before.
Because when it comes to exchanging seed internationally, if you can't if you can't offer anything in return, it gets a little tricky. So I look after the North American dryland collection at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne. And I'm working to try and bring seed into the country, which is obviously, tricky anyway with the restrictions on the species you can bring in. There's a very limited palette of species, particularly climate change suitable species. But I can send some seed to America, very small seed lots to America without a phytosanitary certificate, but to send anything to Europe and I think the UK or to a lot of those countries, you really need a phytosanitary certificate.
Yeah, it's something definitely I can raise through our networks and up through the GANs and just see. Could you shoot me an email and I'll see if I can pass that on and see what we can do and try and get some actions or some way forward anyway.
That'd be brilliant.
Damien?
Thanks, Sheree.
No worries. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Sheree. Joe, it might be worth having a chat to Beck Miller in the seed bank research area, and I think Andre maybe, just because they send seed a lot over to the Millennium Seed Bank. And so one of the ways that you could potentially do it is if you were to bank that seed with the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew, then they would be able to provide that seed to Geneva or wherever it is in Switzerland it needs to go. So they should have some sort of a setup already, because they'd be duplicating seed at Kew. Have you explored that?
Oh, brilliant. No, we haven't actually. We don't speak to our internal staff. What are you talking about? No, we haven't spoken to them. We've spoken to the Department of Agriculture several times, but not to our, our botanists. So that's a great idea. Thank you.
No worries, because I've had a lot of chats with the ag department back when I was doing Seed Bank Partnership, and it gets really complicated and difficult. But we found that a lot of the stuff, what we tried to do is get a bit of what was called a golden ticket, and that was to try and allow anything coming back from Kew to come into the country, because we had a situation where one of our partners, it was actually it was Adelaide, the seed bank there tried to bring back seeds of a glycine, was it La Troviana, back after the bushfires, and it almost got destroyed in quarantine. And we managed to get it stopped, and they had it brought in and they did their restoration work. But as part of that, we got what they called a golden ticket to allow stuff to go a little bit more freely. So yeah, that'd be probably a good option.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, we so far had not too much difficulty bringing things in that are on the BICON permitted species list, but I presume that's an exception to that rule.
Yeah, well, this was one of the ones. It's an Australian species collected back in the 90s, so it was something we'd sent over there, and then they were going to destroy it coming back. So it was one of those sort of utopia moments that was wonderful to be a part of.
Fantastic, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Joe and Damien. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody else, wants to raise anything before we go, I'll just see. Oh, Joe, you've still got your hand up, but I'd say that's just been left up.
That's just because I can't work out how to turn it off. Here we
No,
go.
all
Thank
good.
you.
Well, we might leave it there. If we start another question, I suppose we might, we'll probably run over time, and trying to keep it just for the hour. But please let me, send some emails. Let me know your feedback on today, and if these sort of workshops where it's a bit more of an open forum are worth running some extras. Just so everybody can have a bit of a chat and a get together. I think it is a really good way to network. I mean, it'd be nice for us all to be in person, but sometimes online, we can reach out to a lot more people. So, so thanks again for everyone for coming in today, and look out for our next forums. So we'll have a few more through the year, and some of those questions we didn't get to, I'll have a look through and see if we can either get some presenters or some discussions started around there. But please feel free to email and I'll pass on your questions or try and answer whatever I can for you. So thanks again, everyone.